AITA for telling my sister I won't attend her wedding because she invited my ex? So a bit of background. I, 28F, have a sister, Jess, 26F. We've always had a pretty solid relationship, despite a couple of arguments here and there. I've been close with her, and she's one of the few people in my family I trust with anything. I'm very protective of her, and we've always had each other's backs. A few months ago, Jess got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Alex, 29M. I'm genuinely happy for them. They seem to have a good relationship, and I know she's excited about this next chapter in her life. The wedding planning started off pretty smoothly, and everything was going according to plan until I found out about the guest list. I ran into Jess a couple of weeks ago, and she casually mentioned that she was working on finalizing the invites. I thought it was strange that she didn't bring it up sooner, especially considering we always talk about the big things in our lives. Then, she casually mentioned, "Oh, I invited James, by the way." My heart stopped for a second, and I was like, "Wait, what? James?" For context, James, 30M, is my ex-boyfriend. We dated for about 5 years, and we broke up about a year ago. It was a pretty tough breakup, but it wasn't the kind of breakup where there was cheating or anything. We just grew apart. Still, it wasn't an easy thing to get over, especially because we shared a lot of mutual friends, including Jess. And yes, Jess and James are friends too. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured they'd see each other at family events, but things between James and me were still somewhat awkward. I was trying to move on and not dwell on the past. When I found out that Jess had invited him to her wedding, I felt blindsided. I tried to mask my feelings and asked her, "Are you sure you want to invite him? I mean, it's kind of awkward, don't you think?" She looked at me, a little confused, and said, "It's not like I'm inviting him to be your date. It's just a wedding. He's a friend. Why does it matter?" At that moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I know it's her wedding and all, but inviting James didn't sit right with me. She must have seen something in my face because she added, "It's not like you two are still together. Why does it matter?" I couldn't explain it right away, but there was this feeling of betrayal. I wasn't expecting Jess to choose me over James, but I did think that, as my sister, she would at least consider how it might make me feel. I've been trying to get over James, and the thought of having to face him at a wedding, especially one where I would be expected to act normal, felt like too much. I told her I needed some time to think about it. I know this sounds dramatic, but I really started spiraling. I reached out to my closest friends to talk about it, and they all agreed that it was an awkward situation, especially given how fresh the breakup still felt for me. Some of my friends were even more vocal, saying they wouldn't go if they were in my shoes because it was too much of an emotional minefield to navigate. The next day, I texted Jess and told her that I wasn't comfortable attending the wedding if James was going to be there. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her decision, but about my own emotional state. I told her that I didn't want to create any tension or cause drama, but I didn't think I'd be able to enjoy the event with him there. I even suggested that I would love to attend if she could either uninvite James or put him at a table as far away from me as possible. She responded quickly with a message that said, "Are you seriously going to ruin my wedding over this? You can't get over a breakup, and you're going to punish me for it? It's not even like he's your boyfriend anymore." I was blindsided again. I tried to remain calm and told her that it wasn't about me being unable to get over it, but about how uncomfortable it would be for me to be there with him, and how I didn't think I'd be able to enjoy the day. I told her I wasn't asking her to cancel the wedding or anything, but just to understand where I was coming from. Her response was much colder this time. She said, "If you're going to make this about yourself, then I'll have to think about whether I even want you there. This is my wedding, and I want the people who matter to me there. If you can't put your issues aside for one day for me, then I'm not sure I can deal with that." I was shocked. My heart sank. I never thought she would be so dismissive of my feelings. I know weddings are a big deal, and she wants everything to go perfectly, but I couldn't help feeling like my sister had chosen James over me. I could sense the tension growing between us, and I was devastated. The next day, she told me that James had already RSVP'd and that she wasn't going to uninvite him because she felt it would be awkward for her and Alex. I tried to reason with her one last time, but she was firm in her decision. I told her that I wasn't comfortable being there if he was, and that I wouldn't be attending the wedding. She didn't say anything in response to that, but I could tell she was hurt. I've been torn up over this. I love my sister, and I want to support her on her big day, but I feel like she completely disregarded how I might feel in this situation. I don't want to cause drama or make things difficult, but I just can't imagine being at her wedding with James there. So now, I'm stuck with this guilt, and I don't know if I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to go to my sister's wedding because she invited my ex? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I, 31F, have been married to my husband, Evan, 33M, for 5 years. Evan and I are pretty close-knit and don't often have many people over unless we really trust them. It's just how we are. My sister, Hannah, 29F, has been dating Bryce, 34M, for about 2 years now, and they recently got engaged. Evan and I have never really clicked with Bryce. He's a nice guy overall, but he can be very condescending, and we've had a few awkward moments in the past. However, I've always put on a smile for my sister, as she's been through a lot in past relationships, and I just want her to be happy. About a week ago, Hannah called me and asked if Bryce could stay at our house for a few days. She and Bryce had some kind of trip planned that required them to leave their place for a few days, and she didn't want him staying alone at their apartment. At first, I didn't think it'd be a big deal, and I agreed to let him stay. Evan was on a business trip for a couple of days anyway, so it would just be me and Bryce in the house. When Bryce showed up, things immediately fell off. He was acting overly friendly, almost too buddy-buddy, and it made me uncomfortable. We exchanged pleasantries, and I showed him to the guest room, but things took a weird turn the next morning. I was getting breakfast ready in the kitchen, and Bryce walked in wearing only a towel. This wasn't unusual in my house, since Evan and I are pretty relaxed about clothing and modesty between ourselves. However, Bryce took it a step further and started making comments like, "Wow, I forgot how nice it is to stay at a place where you can feel comfortable, and Evan must not mind you walking around like this." I was a little confused, but didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly, I told myself. The next day, things escalated. Evan had come back from his trip early, and when I introduced them, Bryce made a remark that immediately made my blood boil. He said, "So, Evan, is this the kind of guy you are? Always letting your wife walk around in practically nothing? I mean, she could at least put on some decent clothes when there's a guest in the house." Evan didn't react immediately, but I could see his face flush, and I could tell he was uncomfortable. I stepped in and told Bryce to knock it off, that he was out of line. Bryce shrugged it off and changed the subject, but I could tell it wasn't just a slip-up. Over the next 2 days, he made several more comments that felt really inappropriate. He kept commenting on my appearance, even saying stuff like, "Evan must be proud to have a wife like you," as if I was some kind of trophy. He also kept asking personal questions about our marriage, whether Evan and I had rules about how often we were intimate, whether we were satisfied in our relationship. It was so invasive and uncomfortable. When I told Evan about these comments, he didn't say much. He just kind of laughed them off and said, "Bryce is just being Bryce." But I didn't think this was just Bryce being Bryce. It felt disrespectful, especially coming from someone who was about to marry my sister. After the 3rd day of this weirdness, I had enough. I told Bryce that he needed to leave. He was shocked and tried to argue, saying that I was being oversensitive and that I needed to lighten up. I repeated that he was making me uncomfortable and that I wasn't going to tolerate it any longer. He left angrily, and I've since been in constant communication with Hannah about the situation. She was furious when I told her what happened. She said I was overreacting, that Bryce didn't mean any harm, and that I should have just ignored him. She also said I was causing unnecessary drama right before their wedding and that I was putting her in a really awkward position. I tried to explain that this wasn't about our wedding, but about respecting boundaries and treating people with decency, but she didn't seem to get it. Since then, my sister has barely spoken to me. She says I've ruined their relationship and made it harder for her to enjoy this time in her life. I feel terrible, but at the same time, I feel like I did the right thing by standing up for myself and my marriage. It's not like I didn't try to talk to Bryce first, and I certainly didn't want things to get to the point of kicking him out, but I also don't think I should have to tolerate disrespect in my own home. I've been getting messages from family members saying that I need to apologize to Hannah and Bryce, and that I should try to make it right before the wedding. I'm torn because I love my sister, but I also think that I was justified in what I did. Am I the asshole for kicking Bryce out of my house and refusing to let him stay again? AITA? AITA for telling my brother that I would not be attending his wedding because he refuses to invite my fiancée? I, 29M, have a brother, 31M, who I've always been close with. We've been through a lot together, growing up in a small town with not many people to turn to. Our bond has been pretty solid, and I've always had his back, and he's always had mine. Now, to give you a bit of background on my relationship, I've been with my fiancée, 27F, for almost 5 years. She's amazing, smart, funny, and really loves me in a way that makes me feel like the best version of myself. She's also been there for me through thick and thin, especially when my family, at times, hasn't been the most supportive. Here's where things get messy. My brother has recently gotten engaged, and while I'm happy for him, I was really shocked when he told me that my fiancée isn't invited to the wedding. It all started a couple of months ago when he casually mentioned his wedding plans. He said it was going to be an intimate ceremony, and they were keeping the guest list small. He then dropped the bombshell that my fiancée wouldn't be included. I thought he was joking. I asked, "What do you mean she's not invited? She's your future sister-in-law, and we've been together for 5 years." He told me that he just didn't feel comfortable with her being there, and that he didn't want any drama at his wedding. Now, I have to explain a bit more about why this was such a big deal. My fiancé and my brother have never really gotten along. There's always been tension between them, mostly because of some things that happened a few years ago. My brother didn't approve of the way my fiancé and I started dating. He thought I was moving too fast and that I wasn't making good choices. He also didn't like how independent she was, and he made some comments about how she wasn't good enough for me. I won't lie, the way he treated her really hurt my feelings at the time, and it's been a point of contention ever since. But despite all of that, we've both tried to make things work. Over the years, I've had to step in a few times to mediate arguments or misunderstandings between them, but I thought we were past it. I knew that my brother still wasn't a big fan of my fiancée, but I didn't expect him to go this far. So when he told me she wasn't invited, I was upset but tried to remain calm. I told him that it wasn't just about the wedding, it was about the principle of family. If he really felt like this after all these years, maybe I should reconsider if I even wanted to attend. He was shocked by my response and said I was overreacting. He told me to think about it from his perspective and that he didn't want any conflict on his special day. He said it wasn't personal, but that he just didn't think they could coexist peacefully at the wedding. I spent the next couple of days thinking about it. I wanted to be there for my brother. I really did. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how hurtful and unfair this situation was. My fiancée has been there for me in ways that my brother hasn't. She's been supportive of me through some of the hardest moments of my life, and I wasn't about to let my brother dismiss her like that. I also realized that this wasn't just about a wedding, it was about me standing up for her and for our relationship. So, I made the decision that I wasn't going to attend the wedding if she wasn't invited. I called my brother and told him, I won't be attending the wedding if fiancé's name isn't invited. I understand it's your big day, but she's my partner, and I won't support a day where she's excluded. He was furious. He called me selfish and said I was trying to make everything about me and her. He said that I was ruining his day and that I was acting like a child. He also said that I was being dramatic and that I should get over myself. He made it clear that this was his decision, and if I couldn't accept it, then I wasn't welcome at the wedding. He told me that if I chose her over him, then I was showing that I didn't care about my family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him that he was the one who was making it about me and my fiancée. I told him that family is supposed to be supportive of each other, and this wasn't just a minor issue. This was a huge deal to me, and I felt like he was choosing to prioritize his own comfort over our relationship. We haven't spoken much since then. My parents have weighed in and told me that I'm being too hard on my brother, but they also see where I'm coming from. My fiancée is devastated because she feels like my family is making her feel like an outsider, even though she's been a part of my life for so long. She keeps telling me she wants me to go to the wedding because she knows how important it is to me, but I'm not sure if I can. I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm the one being unreasonable here. I understand that weddings are stressful and that my brother might feel conflicted, but I don't know if I can just pretend like everything is fine when he's actively excluding my fiancée. I know some people will say I should just go to the wedding and support my brother, but I feel like that's just letting him off the hook for treating my fiancée so poorly. So, AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding if my fiancée isn't invited? AITA for refusing to let my sister's friend stay in my apartment, causing a huge family rift? So I, 29F, live in a fairly small one-bedroom apartment in a big city. I'm fortunate enough to have a good job that allows me to afford the rent, but it's not exactly a huge place, and it doesn't have a guest room. To be honest, I'm really protective of my personal space because I've always lived alone, and it's been a bit of a sanctuary for me, especially after a couple of years of personal struggles. Now, my younger sister, Emily, 25F, and I have a somewhat complicated relationship. We're not enemies, but we've always been a bit distant. Growing up, we were never the best of friends, and we've had our fair share of disagreements over the years. Emily is one of those people who can be a little overwhelming. She tends to be a bit of a people pleaser and, in turn, has a habit of making decisions that affect others without really thinking them through. I'm more of a reserved, introverted type, so I like things my way, calm, predictable, and quiet. A few months ago, Emily came to me with a request that, at first, seemed totally harmless. She told me that her friend, Sarah, 26F, was going through a tough time. Sarah had recently moved to the city and was having trouble finding a place to stay. Emily had been helping her out with temporary solutions, but nothing seemed to work. According to Emily, Sarah was desperate and needed a place to crash for a couple of weeks. Emily asked if I could let her stay in my apartment. Now, I don't know Sarah very well. I've met her a handful of times, and she seems nice enough, but I've never had a particularly close relationship with her. I'm also someone who values my privacy more than most people, so having a stranger stay with me, especially for an undefined amount of time, didn't sit well with me. I told Emily that I wasn't comfortable with the idea and explained that my apartment is really small and not suited for guests. I also told her that I just wasn't in a position to have someone stay with me right now, especially someone I didn't know that well. Emily didn't take it well. She immediately got upset and accused me of being selfish and unsympathetic. She said I was being overdramatic and that I couldn't even give her friend a place to stay for just a couple of weeks. According to her, it was a small ask that would mean so much to Sarah. She said that Sarah was already dealing with enough and that this would be an easy way for me to help out a friend in need. I explained that it wasn't about not wanting to help. It was about the fact that I wasn't comfortable with the situation. I don't mind offering support in other ways, like helping Sarah with resources or pointing her in the direction of affordable housing, but I really didn't want to give up my space. Emily then started bringing up things from our past, accusing me of never being there for her when she needed me or acting like I didn't care about her friends. She even mentioned that I had refused to let her stay with me a couple of years ago when she was going through a rough breakup and needed somewhere to crash. To be honest, I felt like she was using that as leverage to guilt me into saying yes. I stood my ground, though. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable with it, and that was my final decision. I thought that would be the end of it, but it only escalated from there. Emily started talking to our parents, telling them that I was being unreasonable and cold-hearted. This turned into a family-wide issue. Our parents called me and asked why I couldn't just be kind and help out a friend. They said that it wasn't a big deal and that I was overthinking things. I tried to explain my reasoning again, but my mom told me that I was choosing my comfort over family and that I should reconsider. The pressure from my family became unbearable. Emily even started posting about the situation on social media, framing it as if I was being a terrible person for not offering to help out Sarah. People in my extended family and a few mutual friends got involved, and suddenly it felt like I was the bad guy in the whole situation. Some people tried to say that Emily was just looking out for a friend, and that I needed to stop being so stubborn. Eventually, I agreed to meet with Emily in person to discuss the situation. I told her that I understood why she was upset, but that it didn't change my feelings. I said I was happy to help Sarah in other ways, but the living situation was a no-go. Emily kept insisting that I was making things harder than they had to be, and that I was choosing my own comfort over being a good sister. She accused me of not understanding what it's like to be struggling, because I have a steady job and live in a relatively stable situation. She said I was being insensitive to Sarah's problems and that I didn't care about her or her well-being. At this point, I was really hurt. It felt like my feelings didn't matter at all, and that all I was to Emily was a source of guilt. I ended the conversation by telling her that I couldn't continue arguing with her about this. I wasn't going to change my mind, and I needed her to respect my boundaries. The fallout from this has been significant. Emily has barely spoken to me since, and our parents have been giving me the cold shoulder. Some of my extended family has taken Emily's side, and I'm getting messages from people telling me that I'm being heartless and should just suck it up for a couple of weeks. On the other hand, a few friends and coworkers have told me they understand where I'm coming from and that I shouldn't feel bad about setting boundaries. But now I'm second-guessing myself. I feel like I've been a bit too rigid in my thinking, especially since this is something that could have been a small favor. But at the same time, I don't think I should have to sacrifice my own space just to avoid feeling guilty. AITA for refusing to let my sister's friends stay with me. Or should I have just helped out for the sake of peace? AITA for telling my best friend she is not allowed to bring her kids to my wedding. I, 29F, have been best friends with Jess, 30F, since we were 5. We grew up in the same neighborhood, went to school together, and even attended the same college. We've always been incredibly close. I was a bridesmaid at her wedding last year, and she's been very supportive during the planning of mine, which has been a huge help. I'm getting married to Matt, 32M, and we've been together for almost 5 years. Our wedding is in 3 months, and we're planning a small, intimate ceremony with about 40 guests, mostly close family and friends. The issue started when Jess sent me a message last week asking if her kids were welcome at my wedding. Jess has 2 kids, Lily, 5F, and Oliver, 3M. Now, I love Jess's kids. They're sweet, cute, and I genuinely enjoy spending time with them. But when I planned my wedding, I decided from the start that I didn't want children at the ceremony or reception. It's not that I don't like kids, it's just that I wanted to have a more relaxed, grown-up event without any potential disruptions. I've always dreamed of having a peaceful, elegant day with adults, and it's a personal preference I've stuck to throughout the planning process. It's not about Jess's kids specifically. I just want a child-free wedding. When I told Jess my decision, she was really upset. She said she thought I would make an exception for her kids since we've been friends for so long and because they're so close to me. She also mentioned that it would be difficult for her to find childcare for both of them, especially since her husband is traveling for work and she doesn't have any family nearby who can help. I understood her frustration, but I stood firm. I explained that I had made this choice months ago, and while I understood her situation, it was important to me to stick to my boundaries. I also mentioned that I had already informed other friends and family with children that they weren't invited to bring their kids, so I didn't want to make any exceptions, as that wouldn't be fair. Jess didn't take it well. She said she was hurt that I was excluding her kids, and that it made her feel like I didn't care about her family. She told me that she had always imagined her kids being part of my special day, and that it felt like I was choosing my vision over our friendship. She even said, "I thought you'd understand how important it is for us to be together as a family." I tried to explain that it wasn't about her or her kids, but about the atmosphere I wanted to create for the event. She didn't seem to understand and kept repeating that she felt excluded and hurt by my decision. Over the next few days, Jess's frustration turned into silence. She didn't respond to my calls or texts, and when I reached out to her, she would give me short replies. It felt like she was pulling away from me, which only made me feel more conflicted. I hate confrontation, and I value my friendship with her a lot, but I also felt like my decision was valid, and I didn't want to back down on something that was important to me. A few days ago, I called her again to try to talk it through. She answered, but her tone was cold. She told me that if I wasn't willing to make an exception for her kids, she might not come to the wedding at all. She said that she couldn't imagine coming to my wedding without them. and that if I couldn't understand her point of view, then maybe it was better if she didn't attend. I told her that I didn't want her to feel forced into choosing between me and her kids, but I also couldn't change my mind about the child-free policy. I told her that the offer was still open for her to come alone, but that it was up to her to decide what was best. I also emphasized that I didn't want her to feel like her kids weren't welcome in my life. This was just about the wedding, not our friendship. Jess hasn't spoken to me much since then. I've heard from other mutual friends that she's been telling people I'm being unreasonable and selfish for not letting her bring her kids, and that it's causing tension in our circle. I've tried to stay neutral, but it's been hard because I feel like my friendship with her is being tested over something I believe is a personal choice. Now I'm wondering if I was too rigid in my decision. I want her to be in my wedding, but I also want to respect my own wishes. I feel stuck between wanting to honor my vision for the day and not wanting to lose my best friend. AITA for sticking to my child-free wedding policy, even if it means potentially losing my best friend. AITA for choosing my ex-husband over my best friend during my wedding. For some background, I, 30F, was married to my ex-husband, Jake, 32M, for 6 years before we got divorced 3 years ago. The marriage wasn't the healthiest, lots of arguments, miscommunication, and some betrayal on both sides. We both tried counseling, but things ultimately didn't work out, and we ended up parting ways. We're both in better places now, and we've managed to stay friends post-divorce. Our relationship is not romantic in any way anymore, but we coexist amicably and have mutual respect. He has even been a support system for me at times when I've needed someone to talk to. My best friend, Emily, 31F, was totally against me staying friends with Jake after our divorce. She was fiercely protective of me, which I appreciated, but she thought I was deluding myself by keeping him in my life. Emily was adamant that I cut him off for good, but I didn't agree. She and I have been friends since childhood, so this was a big issue for us. Despite our disagreements, I never expected it to become a huge issue until recently. Flash forward to a few months ago, I got engaged to my now fiancé, Tom, 35M. We've been together for 2 years, and I can't imagine my life without him. The engagement was a whirlwind of excitement, and we began planning our wedding. During the early stages of planning, I asked Emily to be my maid of honor, which she eagerly agreed to. We were going to have a small, intimate ceremony with a few close friends and family. Here's where things got complicated. I decided I wanted to invite Jake to the wedding, mainly because he's one of the few people in my life who I can rely on. Yes, we have a history, but we've built a friendship based on mutual respect and understanding over the years. He didn't ask to be invited, but I thought it would be nice to have him there to celebrate this new chapter in my life. When I told Emily about my decision, she completely flipped out. She told me I was disrespecting Tom, myself, and our relationship by even considering inviting my ex to the wedding. She said it would be disastrous and awkward, and she couldn't believe I was even thinking about it. I tried to explain to her that it wasn't about Jake or our past relationship. It was about me maintaining a healthy, supportive friendship with someone who had been a huge part of my life for so long. Emily insisted that I had to choose between her and Jake, and that if I invited him, she wouldn't attend the wedding. This was a huge blow. Emily and I have always been extremely close, and the thought of her not being at my wedding was devastating. I didn't want to lose her as a friend, but I also didn't want to alienate Jake, who had been a steady presence in my life. Tom was supportive of me throughout the entire ordeal. He told me he didn't mind Jake coming, as long as there was no drama. I asked him if he was really okay with it, and he reassured me that he trusted me and was fine with whatever decision I made. I really appreciated that, but I was still torn. I tried talking to Emily again, but she was adamant that I was being selfish. She said I was putting my comfort with Jake above our friendship and the integrity of my wedding day. She told me I was being naive and that things would never be the same if Jake showed up. She was hurt that I didn't care enough about her feelings to choose her over my ex. It was a complete standstill for a while. After a few weeks of back and forth, I decided to invite Jake anyway. I spoke with Tom again, and he was still fine with it. I explained to Emily that I didn't want to lose her, but I felt like I had to be true to myself and my choices. It wasn't about my past with Jake. It was about having someone who had been a part of my life in the past supporting me as I moved into my future. The day of the wedding came, and things were very tense. Emily showed up, but it was clear that she was uncomfortable. Jake was there too, and he was nothing but respectful. He stayed in the background, and we didn't really interact much throughout the ceremony. However, Emily was visibly upset, and her energy was hard to ignore. At one point, she pulled me aside and gave me a long speech about how I had ruined our friendship and how she didn't know if she could look at me the same way anymore. I was heartbroken, but I tried to keep my composure. The rest of the day went smoothly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been permanently broken between Emily and me. After the wedding, Emily barely spoke to me. She still sends short, curt messages, but the warmth is gone. Now, a month later, I feel conflicted. I'm happy with my decision to invite Jake. He was a quiet, supportive presence that day, and I felt at peace having him there. But at the same time, I feel like I've lost my best friend. I don't regret the wedding or my decision to keep Jake in my life, but I'm unsure if it was worth losing Emily over it. She's acting like I betrayed her, and I don't know if there's a way to fix things. So, AITA for choosing my ex-husband over my best friend during my wedding. I, 32M, have been married to my wife, Julia, 30F, for 6 years. We've got 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. My wife's family is pretty tight-knit, and I get along with most of them, but there's always been some tension with her sister, Clara, 28F. It's not that I dislike her, but she's a bit much sometimes. She has a very unique personality. She's dramatic, often making everything about her, and she's prone to overreacting in almost any situation. Clara's been married to her husband, Greg, 30M, for about 5 years. They didn't have the easiest relationship from the start. Clara would often vent to Julia about how Greg wasn't pulling his weight, wasn't affectionate enough, and how he was distant. But every time I saw them together, they seemed fine, or at least I thought they did. Then, a few months ago, Clara called Julia in tears and told her that Greg had left her. Apparently, he'd packed up and moved out of their house with no warning, and she was devastated. At first, I wasn't too concerned. People have problems, and relationships sometimes fall apart. But then, Claire started calling us constantly. She'd leave messages, send texts, and even drop by unannounced. It got to the point where we were hearing from her almost every day. Julia and I tried to be supportive, but it was hard to navigate. We both work full-time, and raising 2 young kids is demanding, so having Clara around all the time wasn't really feasible. Julia and I talked about it, and we decided that we should offer Clara a place to stay for a little while. It seemed like the right thing to do, but I told Julia that I wasn't comfortable with Clara staying in our house for an extended period, especially if she was going to be as emotionally charged as she had been. I suggested that Clara stay for a few weeks to get back on her feet, but I wasn't open to having her here indefinitely. Julia agreed, and we both figured that would be a fair compromise. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and Clara's situation has become even more complicated. She's been spiraling emotionally, making everything about how her life is over because of Greg leaving her. The constant crying and venting were wearing on both of us. I get it. Her marriage fell apart, but it was starting to feel like we were her emotional dumping ground. A couple of weeks ago, Clara came to us asking if she could stay longer because she couldn't afford rent on her own. She didn't have any savings, and her job wasn't paying enough for her to live independently. I knew Julia was torn. She wanted to help her sister, but I wasn't so sure. We have a 3-bedroom house. 1 room is for us, 1 room is for the kids, and the 3rd room is an office. My office is where I get work done, and it's important to me to have a quiet space. I work remotely, so being able to focus is crucial. I didn't want to turn it into a guest room for an indefinite amount of time. The idea of Clara living with us for months on end, especially with her emotional state, just didn't sit right with me. I told Julia that I wasn't comfortable with Clara staying much longer. I suggested that Clara should look for a more permanent solution, like finding a place to rent or staying with her parents. Julia was upset, but agreed to talk to Clara about it. I knew it wouldn't go well, though. When Julia told Clara that we couldn't have her staying with us indefinitely, Clara lost it. She cried, begged, and accused us of not caring about her. She said she was just getting over the worst time of her life, and instead of being supportive, we were pushing her away. She said that we were kicking her while she was down, and that it felt like we were abandoning her when she needed family the most. The whole thing spiraled from there. Julia felt guilty, and I felt like I was being blamed for something that wasn't my fault. I understand that Clara was going through a tough time, but I didn't feel like it was healthy for our family to have her living with us long term, especially with the emotional toll it was taking on everyone. We weren't equipped to be her therapists, and it felt like she was relying on us to fix everything for her. I know Julia wants to help her sister, but I can't help feeling like Clara is using her situation to manipulate us. She knows how much Julia cares about her, and it feels like Clara is trying to guilt her into letting her stay longer. I feel bad for her, but I don't think it's our responsibility to bear the brunt of her emotional distress, especially when it's starting to affect our family dynamic. To make things worse, Julia's parents are pressuring us to be more accommodating. They say that families should always help each other, especially in tough times like this. They've made comments about how they'd be willing to take Clara in if they had the space, but they think we should be doing more for her since we have the room. Now, I'm stuck in the middle of all this. I'm being accused of not caring, of being unsympathetic, and of putting my own needs ahead of family. I want to help Clara, but I don't want to sacrifice my own family's well-being for the sake of it. I've already made the compromise of offering her a place to stay temporarily, but now I feel like I'm being expected to do more than I'm comfortable with. I don't want to be seen as the bad guy here, but I also don't want to be manipulated into feeling responsible for Clara's emotional state. I'm just trying to do what's best for my wife, my kids, and myself. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law live with us after her husband left her. AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding after she uninvited me for being too honest. So a bit of background. I, 28F, have been best friends with Jenna, 29F, since we were kids. We've gone through everything together. High school drama, college struggles, and all the ups and downs of life. I'd say we've always had a pretty honest relationship. We both value transparency, even when it's uncomfortable, which I thought was one of the things that made our friendship so strong. Recently, Jenna got engaged to her long-term boyfriend, Jake, 30M. I've known Jake for years, and honestly, I've never been a huge fan of him. He's a nice guy, don't get me wrong, but he's not someone I would have pictured Jenna with. I've always felt like he doesn't fully appreciate her. He's a bit self-centered, can be dismissive, and have a history of making her feel small in certain situations. I'm not saying he's a terrible person, but I just felt like Jenna could do better. I never outright told her this, but I made my feelings clear in a few indirect ways. Now, Jenna and I have always been able to talk about anything, even the difficult stuff. So, a few months ago, she asked for my opinion on her wedding planning. She was excited, and I could see she was really happy with how things were coming together, but something felt off to me. When we talked about the guest list, I didn't hesitate to bring up my concerns. I told her that I thought Jake's family had been acting a little shady lately, and that I was worried they might cause drama at the wedding. I also said that while I knew Jenna was excited, I didn't want her to overlook any red flags in her relationship just because of the wedding pressure. In hindsight, I can see how this might have come off as a little blunt, but that's how we've always been with each other, straightforward and real. I figured she would appreciate my honesty because that's what we've always done. Instead, she got visibly upset. I tried to backpedal, saying I wasn't trying to attack Jake, just expressing my concern, but she shut me down. Over the next couple of weeks, I could tell things were getting tense between us. She stopped reaching out as much, and when she did, the conversations were a bit colder. I thought it might be a phase, but then about a month before the wedding, Jenna called me and told me that she didn't want me to be in the wedding anymore. She said I had made her feel like she wasn't capable of making her own decisions and that I had been too negative about her relationship. She said that if I couldn't fully support her choice to marry Jake, then I wasn't welcome at her wedding. At first, I was shocked. I felt like she was overreacting, but I didn't argue with her. I told her I understood where she was coming from, but I didn't think I was wrong for expressing concern about her future. Jenna was having none of it, though. She said that she wanted people who would celebrate her happiness, not rain on it. I tried to reason with her, telling her that I loved her and I just wanted the best for her, but she wasn't having it. She said that I was just making things harder for her and that maybe I needed to take a step back. I was devastated. This wasn't just a friend I was losing. This was my best friend, the person I had shared so many parts of my life with. And now, because I voiced my concerns, she was cutting me out. I was hurt and confused, but I respected her decision, even if I didn't agree with it. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. I got a text from Jenna saying she hoped we could talk before the wedding. I was a little apprehensive, but I agreed to meet up. When we sat down, she apologized for the way things had gone down. She said she was just feeling overwhelmed with everything going on and that she had lashed out at me because she felt like I was the only one who was being critical of her relationship. She admitted that she had gotten cold feet about the wedding, but didn't want to admit it to anyone, including herself. She asked if I could come to the wedding after all, but I had to admit I wasn't sure if I was ready to just forgive and forget. The way she had uninvited me had stung, and I felt like my opinion had been invalidated. I told her that I didn't think I could attend the wedding, especially after everything that had happened. I said that if she couldn't appreciate my honesty and respect my concerns, then I wasn't sure I could just flip a switch and be there to support her in this big moment. It wasn't just about me. It was about her not valuing the person I had been to her all these years. Jenna was really hurt and said I was being petty and that I was making it about myself. She told me that if I truly cared about her, I would be there for her on her special day, regardless of my personal feelings about Jake. She also mentioned that I was the only one who had a problem with the relationship, and maybe it was time for me to let go of my opinions. Now I'm stuck. I feel like I've been unfairly painted as the villain here, but I also understand that maybe I could have handled the situation better. I do want to be there for Jenna, but I don't know if I can just pretend everything's fine when I don't agree with her decision to marry Jake. I also don't want to be someone who constantly causes drama at every event. I'm torn between staying true to my feelings and showing up for my best friend. So, AITA for refusing to attend the wedding after being uninvited for being too honest. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for demanding my sister's husband to leave my house after he berated my 3-year-old daughter. I, 28F, have a daughter, Lily, who is 3 years old. She's a sweet, but sometimes a little sassy, toddler. I know that she can be a handful at times, but she's also extremely polite and generally well-behaved when she's around others. Her dad and I, who are divorced but co-parent very well, have worked hard to make sure she feels loved and supported by both sides of her family. My sister, Carla, 30F, and I have always been close, but things have gotten a little weird ever since she married Greg, 32M, about a year ago. He and I don't really get along. He's a very blunt person, almost to the point of being rude, and I've never been a fan of his straight-shooter mentality. He also has some issues with his temper. At least, that's how he comes off to me. He's got a history of making snide comments about people, and while my sister always brushes it off, it bothers me. I've always been careful around him, but I try to be polite because I don't want to start family drama. I host family gatherings at my house regularly, so my sister and her husband are frequent visitors. This past weekend, we had one of those gatherings. Everyone was having a good time, food, drinks, kids running around, all of that. My daughter was playing with her cousins in the living room when Greg came in and sat down on the couch. Lily, as usual, ran up to him, excited to show him the picture she had drawn. She said, "Uncle Greg, look, I made this for you." Greg barely glanced at it and grunted, "It's just a bunch of scribbles, kid." Now, I get that Greg isn't exactly warm and fuzzy, but that was a bit harsh, even for him. I'm all for being honest, but a 3-year-old doesn't understand the complexities of what a bunch of scribbles means, especially when she was so proud of it. Lily, understandably, looked a little crushed, but she tried to shrug it off and ran back to her cousins. I didn't think much of it at the time and carried on chatting with the rest of the family. But later, while we were all sitting down for dinner, Lily came over to Greg again and asked, "Do you want to play with me, Uncle Greg?" He sighed loudly, rolling his eyes, and snapped, "I'm not here to play with kids. You need to stop bothering people." Lily just stood there, confused, before slowly walking away with her little shoulders hunched. At that moment, I felt my blood start to boil. I told Greg, "Hey, that was really uncalled for." She's just a kid. You can't talk to her like that. He looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable and said, she's fine. Kids need to learn that not everything is about them. Maybe if she wasn't so clingy, she wouldn't be so annoying. At this point, I was livid. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that he'd been acting like this around Lily for a while. Just generally dismissive, rude, and honestly kind of mean. So, I told him, you need to leave my house. He raised an eyebrow and laughed. What? Are you serious? Over a kid being a little annoying? I was 100% serious, though. I said, yes, I'm serious. You don't get to talk to my daughter like that. If you can't be respectful to her, you can leave. Carla immediately jumped in, defending her husband, saying I was overreacting and that Greg didn't mean any harm. I told her that I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses for his behavior, and if she didn't like it, she could leave too. This caused a scene, and Carla ended up leaving with Greg, but not before making a few comments about how I was being dramatic and couldn't take a joke. The rest of the family seemed uncomfortable but didn't say much. Since the event, my family has been split. Some are on my side, saying Greg's behavior was unacceptable and that I had every right to stand up for my daughter. Others, including Carla, think I went too far and should have let it go. Carla has barely spoken to me since, and has made it clear she feels I'm being unreasonable. She says Greg doesn't get along with kids and that I should just let him be himself. But I don't believe that's an excuse to be rude to a child. I've had a few people say I should have spoken to Greg privately about it instead of causing a scene, but I felt like it was important to stand up for my daughter in the moment. So, AITA for demanding Greg leave my house after he was rude to my daughter? Or did I overreact and should have just let slide? AITA for taking my daughter on a Disneyland trip after my wife lost her job, knowing we couldn't afford it? So I, 34M, have been married to my wife Rachel, 32F, for 10 years. We have a 9-year-old daughter, Emma. Over the years, things have been going pretty well for us financially. Rachel has always had a steady job as a marketing manager, and I've been working as a software developer for a well-paying company. Life was pretty stable, and we were able to enjoy some luxuries like vacations and treats for our daughter. I have to admit, I was proud of our ability to provide her with experiences we didn't have growing up. The issue started a couple of months ago when Rachel's company went through a massive downsizing. She was laid off with several other people in her department. I can't say it came as a total surprise. There have been talks about budget cuts and restructuring for a while. Still, it hit her hard. She's always been someone who's defined herself by her career, so losing her job really shook her confidence. She spent days applying for new positions, updating her resume, and networking, but the job market was tough, and she wasn't getting much traction. She kept saying she just needed some time, but I could tell she was getting more stressed and down on herself. During this time, Emma and I tried to keep things as normal as possible. I took on more work to try and cover things financially while Rachel focused on her job search. I reassured her constantly that we would be fine and that I could handle things. But it was becoming clear that Rachel was struggling with the financial burden. She was more irritable, snapping at me when I tried to help, and was generally just withdrawn. Here's where things get complicated. Before Rachel lost her job, we had been talking about taking a trip to Disneyland with Emma for her birthday. Emma had been asking for it for years, and we'd promised her that we'd go once things were a little easier financially. Rachel had been planning the trip for months. She had already started saving for it, and we were making a big deal out of it because we thought it would be a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. When Rachel got laid off, we had to reassess our finances. I knew that with the uncertainty of her job search, it was going to be harder to afford a big trip like Disneyland. I told Rachel that we needed to talk about whether we should still go or not. But Rachel, in her stressed state, was insistent that we cancel the trip. She argued that the priority was for us to save money in case her job hunt took longer than expected. I completely understood where she was coming from, but I also knew how much Emma was looking forward to this. I could tell that canceling the trip would devastate our daughter, and I didn't want to let her down. Rachel was already feeling so defeated with her job loss. I didn't want her to feel like she had let Emma down, too. So, I made the decision to go ahead with the trip. I paid for it using a good chunk of my savings and a couple of credit cards that had no interest for the first year. I didn't consult Rachel first because I knew she'd say no. In my mind, I justified it as something I had to do for Emma. She had been so excited about the trip, and I knew if we canceled, it would really crush her. I didn't tell Rachel what I had done until the day before we were supposed to leave. I came home from work, packed our bags, and told her we were going to Disneyland. At first, she thought I was joking. When she realized I wasn't, she was livid. She called me irresponsible and said that I was being selfish by spending money on a vacation when we could be using it to make sure we had enough for emergencies. She accused me of not respecting the financial strain we were under, and that I was prioritizing Emma's happiness over the stability of our family. I tried to explain that I just didn't want to let Emma down, especially after everything that had already been going wrong. I told Rachel that we could figure out the finances later and that this trip would be a positive thing for all of us. Rachel, however, didn't see it that way. She said I was being reckless and that by going ahead with this trip, I was putting our financial future in jeopardy. We went anyway. The trip itself was great. Emma was over the moon, and seeing her face light up at Disneyland was worth every penny. But as soon as we got back, things got worse with Rachel. She was still angry at me for going, and now she was stressed about the financial fallout. She told me that I was being selfish for prioritizing Emma's joy over our financial security, and that I had made a decision without considering the long-term consequences. We've had several fights since returning, and I can tell that Rachel's resentment is building up. I'm now questioning if I did the wrong thing. I want to make a good memory for Emma and show her that even when things aren't perfect, we can still have fun together as a family. But Rachel seems to think I acted out of some misguided desire to save Emma from disappointment at all costs, without considering the consequences. I understand her perspective, but I also feel like I made the right choice in giving Emma something she really wanted. We could always figure out the finances later, right? So now I'm wondering if I've messed up here. AITA for taking Emma on the trip after Rachel lost her job, knowing we couldn't really afford it? Or was I right to try and give her something to look forward to during such a stressful time? AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law attend my wedding after she ruined my engagement? I, 28F, have been engaged to my fiancé, Jake, 30M, for about 6 months now. We've been together for almost 5 years, and everything's been going smoothly, or at least I thought so, until recently. My sister-in-law, Emma, 32F, has always been a bit of a troublemaker, but I try to keep things cordial for the sake of family. However, she did something last month that I still can't get over, and it's left me wondering if I'm being too harsh about it. Jake and I got engaged during a surprise trip to a cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway, and after years of subtle hints, I had a feeling he was going to propose. When he finally did, it was perfect. The setting, the moment, the emotions, we were on cloud nine. The issue started shortly after we shared the news. Jake's family was thrilled for us, as expected. But when we told them in person, Emma, his older sister, seemed genuinely happy at first, or at least she pretended to be. After the celebration, she casually asked me what ring I got. I told her it was a beautiful custom design, a mix of vintage and modern, exactly what I'd always wanted. I was excited to talk about it, because I really love the ring. I told her how Jake worked closely with the jeweler to make sure it was perfect, and I couldn't wait to show it off to everyone. Emma smiled, but there was something off about her expression. About a week later, Jake and I were out at a family dinner when Emma pulled me aside. She didn't waste any time getting straight to the point. "You know, I would have been way more careful about picking a ring if I were you," she said. I was stunned. I assumed she was going to compliment the ring, but instead, she kept going. "It's just kind of tacky. It's like you're trying too hard to be different. I would have gone with something classic and elegant. But hey, it's your choice." I was speechless. My first instinct was to brush it off and laugh it off as Emma, just being her usual self, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to undermine me. Still, I didn't say much because I didn't want to cause a scene. I told Jake what happened when we got home, and while he didn't exactly take her side, he didn't think it was a big deal. He told me to just ignore her, but I couldn't let it go. Fast forward to the engagement party a couple of weeks later. The whole family was invited, including Emma. Everyone was in a great mood, celebrating with drinks, food, and toasts. But then, right in the middle of the evening, Emma made an announcement that completely threw me off. She casually stood up and said, "So, I know everyone's been celebrating, but I need to share some news too." Everyone fell silent, and I was bracing myself for something that was clearly going to be uncomfortable. She continued, "I'm actually engaged too." The room went quiet for a moment before the murmurs began. I was completely blindsided. Emma hadn't mentioned anything about being in a relationship, let alone getting engaged. She went on to tell us about this guy she'd been dating for only a few months. Let's call him Dan. She said they had been keeping it private because she didn't want to rush things, but clearly she was so excited to announce it at my engagement party. Her fiancé wasn't even there to celebrate, which seemed odd to me, but I didn't want to judge too harshly. I felt incredibly awkward, but I did my best to smile and congratulate her. The rest of the night felt incredibly tense, and I could tell that no one knew how to handle the situation. Emma tried to take center stage throughout the night, talking about how excited she was for both of us, but it felt like she was trying to steal my moment. It didn't help that she kept mentioning how her engagement was a little more low-key than mine, but that she didn't want to upstage me, all while making sure everyone knew that her ring was much more classic than mine. I could see people getting uncomfortable, but no one said anything. I was too upset to even talk to her about it. I didn't let it ruin the whole night, but I was clearly hurt. When Jake and I got home, I told him everything that happened, and he got just as upset as I did. He tried to downplay it, saying she probably didn't mean to make things weird, but we both agreed that she went way too far. It was one thing to give me unsolicited opinions about my engagement ring, but announcing her own engagement at my engagement party felt like an intentional attempt to draw attention away from me. At this point, I had had enough. I told Jake that I didn't want Emma at the wedding. He was a little shocked and tried to talk me down, saying that it was his family, and we should be the bigger people. But I felt like Emma had already crossed the line too many times, and I wasn't going to let her overshadow my day too. Jake was upset with me for not wanting to make peace with her, but I told him that she could apologize for what she did first. I didn't want someone who intentionally tried to take attention away from me to be part of such an important moment in my life. After a few days, Jake and I had a serious conversation about Emma, and he ended up saying that he agreed with me. He said he understood why I didn't want her there and that we should have a wedding day that wasn't filled with drama. I was relieved, but also felt a little guilty. Maybe I was overreacting? I really don't want to cause tension in the family, but I feel like Emma has been constantly disrespecting me and my relationship. While I told some of my friends about the situation, most of them were supportive, but a few suggested that I should let it go and just invite Emma to keep the peace. They argued that I should rise above it, even though I know it would make me feel uncomfortable to have her at the wedding after everything that's happened. Now, I'm starting to wonder if I'm being petty. Should I just let it slide and invite Emma for the sake of family harmony? Or is it okay for me to stand my ground and refuse to let someone who's acted this way at my engagement party be a part of my wedding? AITA for refusing to let Emma attend my wedding? AITA for refusing to let my sister stay at my house after she kicked my dog out of the living room? I, 29F, have a sister, Lily, 31F, who is very important to me. Growing up, we were super close, always doing everything together, from holidays to random weekend adventures. However, in the past few years, we've drifted apart. This distance was mostly because of her changing personality after she got married. She married Greg, a guy she met at work, and once they tied the knot, she seemed to start seeing things differently, especially when it came to her space and what was allowed or not in her life. Now, don't get me wrong, Greg is nice enough, but he's extremely particular. He doesn't like dogs, he's super neat, and he has some weird rules that he's made Lily follow, like no eating after 8 p.m., no shoes on the furniture, and this one is especially weird. No pets allowed in the living room. It's like she traded in some of her personality to keep the peace in the relationship. I have a dog, Max, who's a very sweet and affectionate border collie mix. He's well-trained, calm, and basically the best dog I could ever ask for. He's been my companion for the past 6 years, and I consider him a part of my family. I don't take him to places where I know pets aren't welcome, but he's always been allowed to roam free in my own home, especially the living room. A few weeks ago, Lily and Greg were in town for a wedding, and they decided to stay with me for the weekend. I told her that it was fine, even though I was a little concerned about the whole situation. I knew that Greg wouldn't be thrilled about the idea of Max being around, but I thought he could manage for just a few days. My house is big enough for all of us, and there's plenty of room for everyone to feel comfortable. Plus, I assumed she'd let her husband deal with it, seeing as this was my home, and my dog has been part of my life long before Greg was even on the scene. The first night, everything was fine. Greg wasn't thrilled about Max being there, but he kept his distance. Max, as usual, was lounging on the couch, and I thought it was just the kind of situation where we'd all coexist. But the next morning, I woke up to Lily sitting in the living room, looking really uncomfortable. Greg wasn't there, but she was acting distant. After some awkward small talk, she casually mentioned that she wasn't sure if it was a good idea for Max to be on the furniture. I thought she was joking, so I laughed it off, but she didn't laugh with me. Instead, she looked more serious and said that Greg doesn't allow any pets in the living room at their house, and it's kind of a rule they have for guests too. She suggested I put Max in a different room while they were there. At first, I was taken aback. I don't let anyone tell me what to do with my dog in my own home, especially not in such a casual and passive-aggressive way. I told her that I was fine with her staying at my place, but I wasn't going to put my dog in a different room just because Greg doesn't like him on the couch. She seemed surprised and then said she didn't want to cause a scene. I could tell that she was struggling between keeping the peace with her husband and respecting my wishes, but I made it clear that Max wasn't the problem. It was Greg's rules that I wasn't going to bend for anyone. Later that evening, Lily and Greg returned from running errands, and Greg immediately walked into the living room, looked at Max on the couch, and made a big deal about how dogs shouldn't be on furniture. I tried to remain calm, but he kept going on about how my house must be filthy because of the dog and how he's allergic to pet dander, a fact I'd never heard before. At that point, I told him that if he had issues with Max being on the couch, he was welcome to use one of the guest rooms, but Max was staying where he was. Things escalated a bit, and Lily tried to mediate by saying that it was just a misunderstanding and that I should maybe consider letting Max sleep in the laundry room for the night to keep things easier for everyone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At this point, I was so frustrated that I told her if she and Greg were uncomfortable with Max being around, they could leave, and I'd find a place for them to stay nearby. She looked hurt and then told me I was being unreasonable. She said I was making a bigger deal out of it than it really was, and that I shouldn't be so hard-headed about something as small as a dog on a couch. I told her that it wasn't about the dog on the couch. It was about respecting my boundaries in my own house. I've never once told her she couldn't do something in my space, but she was now asking me to make unreasonable accommodations just to keep her husband happy. They ended up leaving early that evening and rented a hotel room instead. Lily sent me a text later that night, saying she was really disappointed in how I handled the situation, and she was upset that I couldn't just let it go for the weekend. She said she didn't want to feel like she had to choose between me and Greg, but that my refusal to make any compromise made things uncomfortable. Now, I feel torn. I didn't want them to leave, but I felt like I had no other choice. I also don't think I was wrong for sticking up for my dog and my boundaries. But Lily is my sister, and I love her. I know that the tension between Greg and Max will never go away, and it makes me question if I handled it the right way. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay at my house after she kicked my dog out of the living room. So I, 29F, have a friend, Megan, 30F, who I've known since college. We were pretty close back in the day, but over the years, we've drifted apart. We don't talk every day, but we keep in touch on social media and will occasionally text or meet up for lunch. I wouldn't say we're super close, but we're not strangers either. Megan recently got engaged to her fiancé, Jack, 32M, and she invited me to her wedding. The invitation was a bit of a surprise, since we hadn't spoken in a while, but I assumed it was just a nice gesture. I sent her a congratulatory message, and she told me how excited she was for the big day and that she really hoped I could come. When the official invitation arrived, it was in a fancy envelope and had all the details. There was a very long list of things they were requesting from guests, including a suggested donation for the wedding and a note saying that the cost of the meal, venue, and some other expenses would be covered by the guests. I thought this was odd, but figured maybe it was a mistake or a misunderstanding. I reached out to Megan to clarify, asking if I was reading it right, and she confirmed that yes, guests were expected to help cover the cost of the wedding. She explained that their families couldn't contribute much and that the couple was trying to keep things affordable, but they still wanted a lavish celebration. She said that while it wasn't technically mandatory to contribute, it was highly encouraged and that most of her other friends had agreed to help out. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I understood that weddings can be expensive and I didn't want to cause any drama, so I decided to contribute. I asked how much they were asking for, and she told me they were looking for $500 per guest. I was stunned. I understand that weddings are pricey, but $500 for a meal and a few hours of celebration felt extreme. I expressed my concerns to her, explaining that while I wanted to support her, that amount was way beyond what I could afford at the moment. I told her that I could give a smaller amount, maybe around $150, but that $500 was just too much. Megan was surprisingly understanding and told me that any amount would be appreciated, but if I couldn't cover $500, she hoped I'd still be able to make it and that it would mean a lot to her to have me there. A few weeks later, I received an email from the wedding planner with an itemized breakdown of what guests would be expected to cover. In addition to the meal, there were charges for things like drinks, decorations, transportation, and guest experience packages. I had no idea what the hell a guest experience package was, but it was another $200. This was getting out of hand. I didn't want to be that person who ruined the mood, but I felt like I had no choice. I texted Megan again and said that after looking at the full breakdown, I wasn't comfortable with the cost. I told her I wouldn't be able to attend if I was expected to pay for everything. She responded with a message that made me feel a little guilty. She said she completely understood my decision, but that it was hurtful because she really wanted me there. After thinking it over, I still felt uncomfortable with the whole situation. I tried to be supportive, but this felt like more than just a wedding. It felt like I was being asked to bankroll someone else's dream day. I didn't want to just walk away, but I also didn't feel like I should be financially stretched to the point of sacrificing my own well-being just to attend a wedding. A couple of days later, Megan posted on social media about how incredible her wedding planning process had been and how thankful she was for all her friends who were helping with the costs. She tagged a bunch of people, including some mutual friends of ours who I knew had agreed to pay the $500. Some of the comments were very positive, like "so happy to help make your day special" and "can't wait to be there." This felt like a slap in the face. I'd already made it clear that I wasn't comfortable with the financial aspect, but seeing everyone else so eager to help cover the wedding's costs made me feel like I was being unreasonable or selfish for not participating. The next day, I received a call from one of our mutual friends, Laura, 28F, who was also invited to the wedding. She said that Megan was hurt by my decision and that it was creating tension in their friend group. Laura said I should reconsider, that it was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and that Megan would never ask anyone to do something they weren't comfortable with. I felt guilty hearing this, but I also stood my ground, explaining that I simply couldn't afford it. Later that week, I reached out to Megan again to apologize for the situation, but I stood firm on my decision not to pay. I told her I would still love to attend her wedding as a guest, but I just couldn't justify the cost. She replied with a long message, explaining that she was disappointed in me and that she felt I was being selfish. She said that true friends support each other, and that if I really cared about her, I would make the effort to contribute. I felt like I was being cornered into doing something I didn't want to do. I had offered to attend without paying for all the extra costs, but she made it clear that wasn't good enough. In the end, I decided not to go to the wedding. I explained to Megan that I just didn't feel comfortable with the situation and that I hoped she would understand. I told her I was still wishing her and Jack the best, but that I couldn't be part of a wedding where I was expected to cover such a significant portion of the expenses. It's been a few weeks since then, and while I've received some messages from mutual friends saying they understand my position, I've also had a few people tell me that I'm being unreasonable. Some have even said that if I really cared about Megan, I would have found a way to make it work. So, AITA for refusing to pay for my friend's wedding and ultimately deciding not to attend? AITA for cutting ties with my best friend after she repeatedly made fun of my wedding dress? Okay, so a bit of background. I, 29F, have been best friends with Emma, 29F, since high school. We've been through everything together: relationships, family drama, career changes, you name it. We were each other's bridesmaids. and I thought we'd be there for each other for the rest of our lives. A few months ago, I got engaged to my now husband, Dave, 30M, and I was beyond excited. I've been dreaming about my wedding day for as long as I can remember. When I started shopping for a dress, I wanted something classic but still unique, something that felt me, not overly traditional but not too out there either. After trying on a few dresses, I found one that I absolutely fell in love with. It had lace, a vintage feel, and a silhouette that suited my body perfectly. I took Emma with me to the fitting, and I was really excited to show her. I thought she'd be as thrilled as I was. However, as soon as I stepped out of the fitting room, her expression immediately changed. She looked me up and down, and I saw a mix of confusion and skepticism in her face. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a getting used to the look moment. But then she said, "Wow, it's a little Princess Y, don't you think? Kind of like something you'd wear for a fairy tale theme park wedding." I laughed it off, assuming it was just her being her usual sarcastic self. But the comments didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, Emma kept making snide remarks whenever we talked about the wedding. She'd say things like, "Is that dress really what you want to wear? It looks like something straight out of a Disney movie. I can't imagine you in it. And are you sure that dress is flattering? It kind of makes you look like you're trying too hard." I try to brush it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed out about the wedding or dealing with her own insecurities. But as the wedding drew closer, her comments became more frequent and hurtful. One night, we were having a girls' night at my place, and Emma started talking about her own upcoming wedding. She's not engaged, but she's been dating her boyfriend for a while, and they've talked about getting married. She casually mentioned that she couldn't wait to wear something more modern and less old-fashioned than the dress I had chosen. At that point, I was starting to get really hurt. It felt like Emma wasn't supporting me or my choices, and it was starting to feel personal. She wasn't just giving her opinion anymore. It was like she was actively putting me down for something that was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life. The breaking point came a few weeks ago at my bridal shower. My mom and my sister had thrown the event, and it was a beautiful afternoon. Everyone was having a good time, and I was feeling really excited and loved. But then, right in front of a group of people, Emma made a joke about my dress again. This time, she said, "I just hope your dress doesn't come with a tiara and a giant wand to complete the princess look." A few people laughed, but I immediately felt the tension in the room. My sister shot Emma a look, and my mom didn't seem too pleased either. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I snapped and said, "Emma, enough. Why do you keep making fun of my dress? It's not funny anymore." Emma looked surprised and said, "What? It was just a joke." I responded, "Well, it's not a joke to me. I've been nothing but excited about this dress, and you made me feel like crap about it every single time we talk about it. I just want some support from my best friend, but you're acting like it's something to ridicule." She went quiet for a moment, but then she said, "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I just think you could do better. It's just not what I would choose. I was just giving my honest opinion." She looked defensive, and it felt like she wasn't hearing me at all. At that point, I realized I wasn't going to get through to her. So I stood up, walked to the other side of the room, and spent the rest of the shower in silence, trying not to cry. When the event ended, I called her and told her that I needed some space from her. I told her that I didn't want her at my wedding if she was going to continue making fun of something that was so important to me. Emma was shocked, and she tried to apologize, saying she didn't mean it like that, but the damage was done. I told her I needed time to think. Over the next few days, we texted a bit, and she tried to explain herself, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't really sorry for what she said. She was sorry she got caught. I also felt like she was more concerned about her own opinions than about how I felt. I ended up telling her that I couldn't continue our friendship in the way it was. I didn't want someone in my life who couldn't respect my choices or be supportive when it mattered most. She was devastated, and I think she still is, but I just don't feel like I can go back to the way things were. I've tried to be understanding, but it feels like she's crossed a line too many times. Now, she's telling mutual friends that I'm being dramatic and overreacting, and that I've ruined our friendship over a stupid dress. A few of our friends have reached out to me, asking if I'm sure about my decision. They think I should let it go and not let something like this get in the way of such a long friendship. I've been going back and forth, trying to figure out if I'm overreacting. I know Emma has always had a sarcastic streak, but I feel like this is different. It's not just a joke, it's a consistent pattern of undermining something that's really important to me. I'm also starting to wonder if I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I am overreacting. So, AITA for cutting ties with Emma over the wedding dress comments. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she asked me to cover up my tattoos. I, 28F, have always been close with my sister, 30F. We grew up together, shared a lot of the same friends, and even went to college in the same city. While we're different in many ways, she's more conservative and traditional, and I've always leaned a bit more on the alternative side. Our bond has always been solid. She got engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 32M, about a year ago, and ever since, she's been planning her dream wedding. The thing is, I've always been someone who loves expressing myself through my appearance. Tattoos, piercings, edgy fashion, those have been a huge part of my identity for the past decade. I have several tattoos on my arms, legs, and neck, but they're all meaningful to me, and I've never cared about how others perceive them. I know they can be polarizing for some people, but I've never let that stop me from wearing them proudly. Around 6 months ago, my sister called me up and said we needed to have a serious conversation about the wedding. I was expecting her to ask me to be a bridesmaid, which I was more than happy to agree to if that was the case. But instead, she brought up my tattoos. She said, "I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me, and I don't want you to take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, you know how important my wedding is to me, and I want everything to be perfect." I agreed to listen and told her she could be honest with me. She continued, "I was hoping you could, cover up your tattoos for the wedding. I know they're a part of who you are, but I think they might be a distraction for the guests. My wedding is going to be formal, and I want everything to be elegant. I just think it would be better if you wore something more conservative, like a long-sleeve dress, and cover them up. I don't want them to take attention away from the ceremony." At first, I was taken aback. I couldn't believe she was asking me to hide something so personal for the sake of her wedding. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I tried to stay calm. I told her I didn't think it was fair to ask me to cover up my tattoos. I said, "I love you, but I've always had tattoos, and they're a part of who I am. I'm not going to pretend they don't exist just because it's your wedding. I'll wear something nice, of course, but I'm not going to hide my body." She looked a little hurt, but didn't push the issue right then. However, the conversation kept lingering in my mind. Over the next few weeks, she kept bringing it up in different ways, sometimes subtly, sometimes more directly. It was clear she was still hung up on it. She'd say things like, "Are you sure you can't wear a sleeve or something? Or maybe a high-neck dress to cover your neck tattoos?" And I just want everything to be perfect for my big day. I finally had enough and told her, "Look, I'm not going to change who I am for your wedding. I'm not asking you to change anything about yourself for me, and I expect the same respect in return. I'll come, but I'm not covering up my tattoos." She seemed upset, but I thought maybe it was just the stress of wedding planning getting to her. The next few days were quiet, but then she sent me a text saying, "If you can't cover up your tattoos, then I don't think I can have you in my wedding at all. It's just too important to me. I really need my day to be perfect, and I don't think I can have anyone who doesn't follow my wishes. I hope you understand." I was crushed. It felt like a slap in the face. My sister, the person I've been so close to my entire life, was telling me that she couldn't have me at her wedding unless I changed myself. After a lot of back and forth, I decided that I couldn't just let it go. It wasn't about the wedding itself. It was about the fact that she was asking me to hide a part of who I am for her sake, and I wasn't comfortable with that. I sent her a message saying, "I understand that your wedding is important, but I can't agree to hide my tattoos. They're part of me, and asking me to cover them up is like asking me to cover up who I am. If that's what it takes for me to be there, then I guess I won't be attending." She didn't reply immediately, and when she did, it was with a short, cold message. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I thought you would be more understanding, but I guess I was wrong." After that, things got worse. She and Mark decided to cut ties with me for a while. I didn't attend the bridal shower or any of the pre-wedding events. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner, and eventually, she stopped talking to me altogether. The wedding came and went, and I didn't go. She posted pictures online, and I saw her and Mark looking so happy, surrounded by friends and family, and I couldn't help but feel hurt. It wasn't about the wedding itself. It was about the way I was treated, like I wasn't good enough or worthy enough to be part of such an important day because of my tattoos. Since then, we haven't spoken much. She sent a message a few weeks later saying that she wished things could have been different and that she hoped we could work things out eventually. But I'm still angry. I don't think I did anything wrong, but I can't shake the feeling that she really betrayed me by making me feel like I wasn't welcome as I am. It's been hard, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I still can't bring myself to reach out to her first. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because she asked me to cover up my tattoos? Was I too harsh, or is she being unreasonable? AITA for refusing to forgive my sister after she sabotaged my wedding? So here's the deal. I, 28F, recently got married to my fiancé, James, 30M, after being together for almost 5 years. Everything was perfect until my younger sister, Ellie, 24F, completely ruined everything. Ellie and I have had a complicated relationship for a while now, but I never imagined she would do something like this. The problem started a few months ago when we were deep into wedding planning. I had asked Ellie to be my maid of honor because, well, she's my sister and we've always been close, despite the occasional disagreement. However, Ellie and I have always had this tension where she tends to try to outshine me or take the spotlight whenever she can. I've gotten used to it over the years, but I thought that as adults, we could put that aside and focus on supporting each other for a big moment in my life. Things started to go south when I noticed Ellie wasn't as involved in the wedding planning as I had expected. She was always too busy to attend dress fittings, to help with invitations, or even to come to the venue for a walkthrough. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed with her own life, so I didn't push it. But as the wedding got closer, I started to feel like something was off. It all came to a head about 2 weeks before the wedding. I had been dealing with a lot of last-minute things and had been trying to keep everything together. Ellie had asked me for some time off from her job to help with the wedding, and I agreed, hoping she would finally step up and be the supportive sister I'd hoped for. Instead, she used that time to make plans with friends, go on a trip, and completely disregard any of the tasks I'd asked her to help with. It felt like she was purposefully avoiding her responsibilities, and I was getting frustrated. But what really took the cake was the day of the wedding. We were getting ready at the venue, and everything seemed fine. I was in my wedding dress, surrounded by my closest friends and family, and feeling this beautiful mix of excitement and nervousness. The ceremony was just a few hours away. But then, right before I was about to walk down the aisle, Ellie approached me with this apology. She said she had something important to tell me, and at the time, I was already stressed and didn't want any drama. But I gave her a moment. She confessed that she had been seeing my now husband, James, for a few months. Apparently, they'd been having an affair behind my back. At first, I couldn't even process it. I thought it was a joke, but the look on her face told me she was serious. She went on to explain that she hadn't wanted to tell me before the wedding, but she felt guilty and needed to come clean. She claimed it was a mistake, that she didn't know what she was doing, and that it was just a fling that meant nothing. I was absolutely in shock. My mind was racing, and I could barely comprehend what she was saying. I told her to leave, that I didn't want to hear another word from her. But it didn't end there. As I walked into the ceremony, feeling betrayed and humiliated, I saw James, who had no idea what had just happened. He looked happy and excited, which only made me feel more disgusted. I couldn't even look at him properly. The ceremony went forward, but I felt like I was on autopilot. I was numb, going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when it couldn't have been further from the truth. But I had already spent so much time, money, and energy on this wedding that I didn't want to call it off or make a scene. I told myself that at least after this, I could go home and figure things out. The reception was a different story. At the party, James kept pulling me aside, trying to talk to me, but I was just too upset to engage. I couldn't stand the thought of him touching me, let alone trying to act like everything was normal. When he pulled me aside for a private conversation, I told him everything Ellie had said. He denied it, of course, but I wasn't buying it. There were just too many red flags that I couldn't ignore anymore. The worst part? Ellie showed up at the reception, acting like nothing was wrong. She was there, mingling with my friends and family like she hadn't just destroyed everything I held dear. I couldn't confront her in front of everyone, so I just avoided her all night. The next day, I called both James and Ellie to have a conversation. I demanded an explanation, but neither of them could give me a good enough answer. James swore it was over, that it had only happened a few times, and that he regretted it. But how could I ever trust him again? And Ellie? Well, she didn't even apologize for what she had done. She just kept saying she was sorry it had to come out this way, and that she never meant to hurt me. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I told both of them I needed space and that I wasn't sure what would happen next. I called off the honeymoon and moved out of our shared apartment. James begged me to come back, and Ellie kept trying to call, but I blocked her. Now, it's been over a month since the wedding, and I'm still struggling with everything that happened. James and I have barely spoken, and I still can't get over the fact that my sister could betray me like that. My family keeps telling me to forgive them both, that everyone makes mistakes, and that I should move on. But honestly, I'm not sure I can. The hurt is so deep, and the betrayal feels like something I can't just brush off. My mom is especially upset with me. She says I'm being too hard on Ellie, and that I need to consider how much she's been through in her own life. My dad is mostly on my side, but keeps reminding me that forgiveness is important. The rest of my family is torn between trying to mediate or staying out of it entirely. I know some people might say I should just forgive and forget, but I feel like this is something I can't move past. I'm considering cutting ties with both of them for good. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my sister, and for even thinking about ending things with James after everything that happened. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.